Welcome to the PVN College Podcast, where our goal is to grow students in the love and knowledge of Jesus Christ. In today's episode, we're going to talk about being called into ministry. What are things that students need to keep in mind as they pursue that call? Our guest today is Pastor Mac McCurry. Mac has over 30 years of ministry experience. He has a Master's of Divinity from Southern Seminary. While in seminary, he worked for several different churches as a part-time youth minister. He then served at Providence Baptist near Frankfort, Kentucky for 2 years as youth pastor and then 7 years as senior pastor. And he has now been the senior pastor here at PVN Church for 19 years.
Almost 19.
Almost 19. Mac, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me to join you today.
It is a blessing already. It is a blessing already.
It made me feel old with that.
I was about to say 30, so 3 decades is also how old I am.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate the encouragement. Now, I do want to just clarify, though, I started it when I was 3 years old.
That's right. So you're I was about to say, you're just 33, 34, right?
Sure.
Well, and it's a podcast, so they can't, you could be as old as you want, man.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so today we're talking about being called into ministry. And this is kind of where I thought of this idea. This is about to be my 6th year in ministry, okay? And I continue to believe that the two most important things for young pastors, in my opinion, the two most important things for young pastors is, number one, the Bible, and number two is older pastors.
And that's where I come in.
That's right. That's where you come in.
Okay.
Yes.
I see that.
Not much older pastors.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
But I think everyone probably starts off in ministry with, and we've talked about this before, but I think everyone probably starts off in ministry with kind of these rose-colored glasses of and ideas of what they think ministry should be. But then reality sets in, and you find out ministry is maybe not what you thought it would be, at least not all the time. And that disappointment can cause people, especially I think younger ministry workers,
right,
to just leave, to say that, this isn't what I thought it would be. If it's going to be this hard, if it's going to be this unexpected, I'm out. And I think it's so helpful to hear from people who have been in ministry for a long time because they've encountered those speed bumps and disappointments and even just not even the big stuff, but the daily frustrations and things. And I just think it's a wealth of information that a lot of younger pastors aren't tapping into. So, okay. I mean, I know that was, we're kind of all over the place, but any initial thoughts on that before we kind of get into the actual Q&A of it all?
Well, I'll agree with you. I mean, honestly, I think that it's very easy to go into ministry or anything with just it's going to be rosy, it's going to be perfect, and it's just going to be so ideal. And then day 2, reality sets in. So,
that's right. Yeah. And I think that can just be like so jarring to people. Mm-hmm. But how helpful would it be if we just look to people who have been through the day 2
sure.
and the day 200 and the day 400, and ask for help in terms of how do we keep going? Sure. What are some ways?
Because we're not the first ones doing it. There have been people that the pillars of the church or the pillars of ministry that have done it before us.
Yeah.
So we can learn something from them.
Exactly. 100%. So okay. So let's get into the real talk, as the young seminarians say.
The real talk.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, Mac. So what are 3 pieces of advice for college students who maybe they're thinking about going into ministry, or maybe they've just started, so 3 pieces of advice for college students thinking about going into ministry.
Do you want me to talk them into it or not?
Whatever you feel led, man.
Well, like I said, you opened with the rose-colored glasses, that kind of stuff. I think, Ryan, the first thing I would say is to just make sure there's a calling there.
Yeah.
A calling from God. When someone comes to a church, whether they're the youth pastor, the children's pastor, the senior pastor, or whatever, then it's a calling to that church. Mm. The church doesn't hire them. They're called to that church. But even more important than that, it's a calling by God.
Yeah.
And so I was called when I was about 15. And so, when in high school, 9th grade, 10th grade, but people say, well, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I'm like, well, I knew in ninth grade that I was going to go into the ministry, and it was wonderful. At the same time, I didn't know whether it was going to be a missionary in Africa or whether it was going to be a church pastor, but it was a joy to have that assurance, if you will. But if someone says, I'm maybe going to go into ministry until something better comes along, you may not want to go in the ministry. So it's not a default or a plan B kind of stuff.
Yeah, so, and I think you're exactly right. I think the calling a lot of times is what provides that endurance in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Because if you're just kind of in it until you find the next thing, well, there's going to be a lot of easier routes maybe, or not just easier, but that flame for ministry can go out if you've kind of got one foot in and one foot out.
Sure.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and it's probably true for any career.
That's true.
Or any life choice, I guess. But especially in ministry, because you do go into it. I heard Junior Hill. He's an evangelist. He's at probably 80-something now, but when he was 20, he was already in ministry. And he said that his first church, maybe in his only church he pastored, he's 20 or 21, and he said that his first month that he walked around going, I'm the pastor of this church, and these people love me, and they think I hung the moon. And he said by like month 3, they want me on the moon. So just a big difference between hung the moon versus on the moon.
Right.
Again, because reality kind of sets in, and that was his joke. But again, I think there is a honeymoon period, but it's not often very long.
Yeah.
And so but it's one of those things where if you're not called by God to go in the ministry, then you may want to look at something else.
Yeah. Don't put all your trust in that honeymoon period. Understand that things that things will come back to
a lot
reality.
of pastors, and not just senior pastors, but I think a lot of ministers in whether youth or education, whatever it is, a lot of them kind of I think they're there 2 years, 3 years, maybe 4, and then they're like, oh, well, it's just not as glamorous as it was, and the honeymoon's gone off, and so they want to go to a different church, or they want to do this, or they want to kind of hop around, skip around, and I think a lot of it is because they have that expectation that it's always supposed to be so glamorous or whatever. I don't know, but again, I think and I could be wrong, but the last thing I read was that the average senior pastor right now in America stays like 3 to 4 years at a church, and so
3 to 4 years.
So I've done that a few years now.
That's
at PVN,
right.
So,
yeah.
But again, I think a lot of it is I don't know. Maybe they preach 3 years of sermons, and they're like, I can go to the next church and just preach the same sermons. I don't know, but again, there's just something about a calling.
Yeah. So. All right. So confirm the calling. All right. What's the second one?
I would say. And I'm not sure the first person that said this, I'm echoing, but if you're called to ministry, you're called to prepare for ministry. And so it's not just, what, I think God's called me to ministry. Let me call a church and see if they'll let me preach Sunday. It's more of, they don't have a pastor, maybe they'll let me preach. It's more of, hey, I'm called to ministry, so I want to further my education. And I'm very thankful like I said, I knew early on. Some people maybe don't know that early, but I knew early on that I was called to ministry. And so after college, then I went on into seminary. And nowadays, whether it's on campus or online, but you can further your education. And again, I didn't learn everything at seminary. There's some things they just can't teach you, don't teach you. But I'm very thankful for that education.
Yeah.
And so between 22 and 26 years old, then I was in seminary.
Yeah.
Didn't pursue a doctorate. I'm still young enough. I don't.
That's right.
Maybe I've got a doctorate. I'm just kidding. I don't know. But the bottom line is I am very thankful for my education, and I would say a call to ministry is a call to prepare by getting whatever education you can with it.
I think you're exactly right, and it's funny. We've talked about this before, but in the church world, think about outside of the church world. I don't think there's any other job in existence where people would say, yeah, I'm going to be a baseball player today. And they just hop in there. You know what I mean? But when it comes to the church world, I think a lot of times we just kind of throw common sense out the window and we forget that, God is a God of order and wisdom. And so with that calling will come tools and desires and not just in preaching, but in music ministry, children's ministry. The call comes with a preparedness as well, or a call to preparedness maybe.
Sure.
Is that the right way to?
Yes, and think about this. Jesus spent 3.5 years with the disciples,
Right.
Pouring into them,
Yep.
and then he left, and Pentecost and all that, and then even Paul, who was Saul, of course,
Right.
but he go to Arabia for like 3
7 or 8
years,
years,
and so
whatever, long
whatever
time.
it was, but he didn't just. Now I'm saved. I'm
Yep.
just going to start. So
a great point.
So there's a preparation time.
Great point. All right, so confirm the call, a call to prepare. All right, what's the last one
The
here?
last one, you put me on the spot here, but I would say there's probably several. But I would go back to it. Kind of maybe goes back to calling a little bit, but you're doing this for an audience of one. I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
Again, if you're saying I'm going to go into ministry and everybody's going to love me, they're going to love every sermon, they're going to love every lesson, they're going to love everything I do. That's not going to go very far in that sense.
Right.
So again, you may make a decision and these people love it, but someone over here doesn't love it, and they may even let you know.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so again, the
No.
audience, well, not just but again, the bottom line is, again, if whatever you do it for the Lord.
Yeah.
And honor Him and please Him, and then God will take care of the rest of it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I know, and I think that shows where is your calling to serve. I think ministry is ultimately a calling to serve Jesus.
Yes.
To serve the Lord, and it's not ultimately a calling to a job, though there is a job involved. It's not ultimately a calling just to teach, though teaching is involved.
Right.
It's ultimately a calling to serve the Lord. It's His way of working in your life. You know what I mean? So we've got our three pieces of advice. So, and again, we've talked about this. You have been in ministry for a long time.
As long as you've been alive.
Give or take. Yeah, give or take. The numbers are fuzzy. So since you've been in ministry as long as you have, what are two things that maybe would be good for people thinking about ministry or starting out in ministry? What are two things that have helped you stay in ministry as long as you have?
Again, we could be here a good while
Right.
with some of those answers, and I'm going to just say, kind of off the top of the list would be having good people around you.
Okay.
And I'm not just talking about
great youth pastors,
great
for
youth
sure.
pastors, Ryan. No, but seriously though, I mean, I'm going to just say throughout 30 years, there have been some wonderful people that I've been able to be around, or been around me. And so whether I was in college or seminary and part-time youth or whatever, but I was able to be around some good people and stable people, and I'm going to say solid people and spirit-filled people. And so, and then even as a pastor here, then I love my wife. She is solid. She's wonderful. She's stable, and she's an encourager, and so she keeps me grounded. And if I come home and just say I've had a rough day, then she's like, it's okay, and she encourages. But between my wife and you guys, and I'm gonna say, great lay leaders in the church.
Yeah.
We've been so blessed here at Pleasant Valley with good deacons and teachers and people that love the Lord, and it's not about them; it's about what's best for the church.
Amen.
And again, I'm so thankful for that. And if I had come to it, if I came into ministry and every other day is another just craziness or chaos or another whatever, then it'd be tougher.
Yeah.
And so I'm here in terms of enjoying ministry 30 years in, rather than when can I retire kind of stuff.
Well, and to your point, I think especially my generation of pastors, we grew up watching the Chandlers and the Pipers and the Platts and these guys, on stage teaching, it's quote unquote just them.
Right.
And so you kind of subconsciously grow into, oh, well, that's what I'm supposed to be. It's just me. But they don't see, the support of Matt Chandler's wife and family, but also his elders and deacons around him, encouraging him, maybe correction at times, even him, right?
Edification, correction.
Edification, They don't see all the things, Old Testament, Moses, Jethro says, you got to get some help, man.
Yeah.
If Moses needed, if Moses needed help, then I think it's unbiblical for us to try to do it alone, but that's the mentality that I think a lot of younger, even just ministry workers, I'm volunteering in the nursery ministry. All right, how can I change this whole thing? Whoa, whoa, whoa. It's not about you changing the whole. Some change can be good, but it's not just about you. You can't do it on your own. Any minute, kitchen, nursing home, nursery, children's, youth, it's just too much.
And I've got you and Bob and Eric and
Sure.
I've got Clyde and Jason, different ones, but Ben, I got a great team. But I will say, not to try to call out names, but Clyde was the interim at PVN before I came.
Right.
And he's been in ministry since he was probably 20.
Right.
And
Clyde is 84, by the way, right? 86?
86. 86. And so just imagine when I came here almost 19 years, then he was the interim and then was able just to come in as like my right arm and as a kind of associate pastor and hospital visitation, shut-ins, nursing homes, preach every once in a while. But just, again, for my time here at PVN, I just got to say Clyde's been my mentor.
Yeah.
I go to his office and seek counseling,
Right.
and he's been my pastor and for a lot of that in the sense of at least 2/3 of my time in ministry, I've had him to where I can say, Clyde, what about this, what about that, and that kind of stuff.
100%.
And it's been great with that. Like I said, I think everybody needs a Paul, someone to pour into them, teach them, mentor them, and then everyone needs a Barnabas, and that's an encourager.
Gotcha.
And we also need to be that as well.
Yeah,
So
100%. So having solid people around you has helped you.
Yeah.
And then the second thing?
it's a word. It's probably a bad word in some circles, and it starts with a D, but it's the word discipline. It's not a real glamorous word, but I would say that discipline is huge nowadays. And again, I'm 3 decades in the ministry. A lot of it is just the discipline of getting up every morning and facing the next day kind of stuff. And some people have that kind of in their DNA. It's kind of more part of their personality or whatever.
Yeah.
Other people have to wake up every day and say, Lord, give me what I need, and pray with the Holy Spirit to do it. But I would say discipline is huge because there are a lot of people maybe that don't have it, and the first wall they hit, they're like, I'm out.
Done.
Or at least they lose the joy.
Yeah.
Satan wants us to lose the joy of whatever we're doing. And so, to think about, well, I'm still in my ministry role, but I hate it.
Yeah.
Or I'm cynical or bitter, whatever it is, sarcastic. But you don't want to be that way. And so, so discipline's huge.
Well, and I think to your point, again, my generation, we've grown up with, and not that these are bad things, but the Passion City churches and the great teachers online, and you see the huge worship sets and all these things, and we think, if it's not that every day, because that's all I see.
Right.
We don't see the back end and all the preparedness that goes into it. But so we just see the finished product, and we think, if it's not this every day, then I'm doing it wrong, or this church is wrong. And inevitably, it's not going to be that. It takes. I just wrote down discipline, and in parentheses I wrote ordinary discipline.
Yeah.
There's nothing cool about getting up early, getting to work when you're supposed to be there, putting your nose in the Bible, or going to the nursing home or going to the hospital, just because that's what you do. There's it'd be awesome if Christian Stanfield was following me around with a guitar, elevating that time in the nursing home, but he's not, and no one was following Jesus around, hyping him up, so to speak.
Right.
It was just Jesus did a lot of miracles, but he also did a lot of remarkably ordinary things in his ministry. And the Lord blessed it. I think, is that a flavor for kind of what you're going with there?
It is, and again, I mean, like I said, discipline is. I'm reading a book right now, in fact, that my D group, a group of men, we're going through, and it's by R. Kent Hughes.
It's Disciplines of a Godly Man.
Yes, and I mean, it'll kick you in the teeth.
Sure.
But just a discipline of purity and a discipline of discipline, and just I mean, just again, whether marriage or just different things, but again, just no matter what, just saying, I'm going to be faithful.
Right.
And I love the verse, 1 Corinthians 10:31. It says, whether then you eat or drink or whatever you do, to the honor of the glory of God. And so, again, just being faithful no matter what.
Yeah, there's nothing cool about eating, but Paul says this is, again, it's just part of it.
Well, it can be cool.
I was about to say, maybe Chipotle is coming soon here, right? So, okay, well, Mac, last thing, any further resources for students who are looking at ministry or thinking about it?
I'm not up on all the podcasts and the
MySpaces
the Instagram, the TikToks
right.
and all that. But I will say, like I said, I would say this book on discipline's a good thing. I've read just in the last year or so, but it was called Prepare by J. Paul Nyquist, I think was his last name. And it's not so much preparing for ministry as much as it's preparing to be a Christian in the culture that we're in now, and it's pretty good.
Sure.
But there are a lot of things like that. But I would say, too, Old Testament, Nehemiah, talk about leadership, talk about discipline.
Yeah.
He had so much opposition from those guys, Tobiah and Sanballat and all that, and yet he finished the wall in 50-something days. So, so Nehemiah would be good, not just to skim over it, but to really
dig in,
kind of digest it. And then also 2 Peter in the New Testament, because there's the opposition and the persecution, and just being faithful, persevering and being faithful.
Absolutely. Well, this was awesome, Mac. Thanks for being with us today, man.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Thanks for inviting me, and I got to sign the table and everything.
It really is a joy.
Sure.
It really is a joy. For more information on this topic, message us on Instagram at PVN College. Listen to the PVN College podcast through Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Watch this podcast on Instagram TV at PVN College or on our YouTube page, Pleasant Valley North. We love you guys, and we'll see you next time.